Just
Got it.
all right, I see it now. I focused on two AI ones. Just think it's been kind of a hot topic lately, and so that was kind of what I searched up when I was in Hillwa. And these two kind of jumped out to me. So the first article was enhancing nursing students' attitudes toward older adults through artificial intelligence virtual simulation. Um, Really, they were looking at seeing if like AI tools could help support well the student learning, and then also their uh, attitudes toward like the geriatric population. And I think we all know this, but kind of the setting for them was like the number of older adults that we're going to be having in the United States by 2050. And I think a real reality that a lot of folks will be working with this population. And sometimes those clinical experiences can be kind of variable, um, especially, and then also those attitudes we might bring in with ageism or maybe lived experiences that are sometimes not quite based in reality. Um, it was a study done in a nursing, like as part of the curriculum for a course, their community health course, um, mixed methods. And again, they were looking at the main intervention was the AI resource. So they had a sorry, my brain's going a few places, but so they used the Amelia Larson, which is the unfolding case from the NLN, and then using AI had it where the students could like talk to this patient and prompt questions. Um, they did have like a before scoring on kind of looking at some of their attitudes toward uh, geriatric populations, and then they had after this intervention to kind of see if attitudes had changed. Um, Again, I think one of the, I guess to me would be like one of the limits. It was part of the program. Students did have a choice and were informed about the study that was happening. But it was, part of that curriculum. And it was only one part within their overall program. They also did some guided reflection pieces, so they could get some quantitative and qualitative information. They did overall notice, sorry, I'm skipping down, and everyone has them, right? I don't know if they get sent out. Yeah. They did see a difference between like that pre and post. It wasn't like a humongous increase. Um, but overall, students saw it a little bit more positively. I really liked some of the themes that came out, especially like students being able to acknowledge, there was some bias. And then the experience with the AI Millie, kind of changing some of that lens. And I think like the first one that jumped out to me, like she was kind of fun, or she was very kind and funny even. Um, and the reason that I kind of had selected this one was I did home health for a while. And it was kind of interesting. Even as I was doing that and having been a nurse a while, I kind of went in with a different lens, especially because most of my background was in pediatrics. And so I kind of think of just even as like students when you're first entering, and you might not get like a home care experience even. And so being able to like have them interact in that environment, I think would be kind of helpful, because it's also a little bit different. Some of the other themes though were like increased empathy and patience. And I imagine working with AI, your patience would definitely be a little bit higher because it's a little bit less, I guess, organic than if you were having a conversation with a real person. And then their communication skills, because one thing they know was if students were kind of going down the wrong line of questioning, the AI would give a response saying that they didn't understand. And so it kind of helped students learn to narrow their focus. Um, And then again, the overall, it wasn't like a huge increase, but students did report that their attitudes had shifted after working with the AI intervention. And then I do think it's important to note some of their limitations in the study. Obviously, again, very focused in this like one point in time, and it was looking at nursing specifically. Um, and then another thing that they brought up was the data protection, which I think wasn't expanded upon, but my assumption there is that they're talking about like student information as they're interacting with the system as well, not necessarily like a patient scenario, because again, this was just an unfolding case study. Um, and then the overall takeaway that AI could help support. Um, and then just as an aside, I think another limitation for me as I was reading it, uh, and this again, I think a little bit earlier with some of the AI, but I think missing some of those organic pieces, like there's times I might want to assess something that's maybe not like relevant at the time, but would be giving more information. So I just have a wondering around like how students, like sometimes some of the track they might have gone down could potentially be an area you want to follow up because that might be giving more information to them. Um, and then I just think some of the other like visual cues might be missing when we're talking like AI, even if it has a person and they're trying to line up and match with a real experience, you are limited somewhat.
Thanks, Brad. Um, when I think about the limitations of AI and I think about the limitations of even, static, high fidelity simulators, I have to pull myself back in and go, okay, what's my objective today? Right? Is my objective to look at bias or to um, practice communication skills or to focus my questions? Then that's what we're dealing with, and then you have to limit the detractors, right? And which is what those questions I think did really well, or that answer that was programmed in there. I'm curious, was this the one that had a grant of some sort for the software, or was that the
Think so,
because I'm
yes.
curious, like, how much time did it take to make the program for Millie's responses? That's where my head goes into the practical, like, creation of it. So I'm like, whoa.
Well, at the same time, I wonder, and Susie, let me know, you're on the forefront of this. When Mary just showed up, we did have some obviously very rudimentary responses from the mannequins. I wonder if they're going to be updating them with the latest technology of AI. That probably would be the next and most appropriate step in scenarios.
They are selling them now at the very beginning of the product lines, not the company that ours are from, but other ones that actually do have an AI component built into them.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard people who have seen them demonstrated, and it's very exciting, but still actually quite limited, because it's kind of early in the technology development.
I was interested in that. I always forget how many of my younger nursing students don't like working with the elderly population because I've always loved it. I've always been particularly fond of working like on dementia units and things like that. But a lot of the younger nursing students, I don't know if it's fear or I don't know what it is, but they're not particularly fond of working with some of the elderly clients. So I think ageism is one of those isms that we don't really talk about that much. Um, but yeah, I thought that was interesting.
I wonder, Chris, if it's a lack of experience, and if we were to perhaps make it as a requirement that they are a CNA or whatever in a nursing home. Like my child is 22 and she loves older people, but she did spend, she worked as a CNA in a nursing home. So you discover the beauty of older people then. And of course, American society, I think, is not necessarily family oriented, where they're not involved necessarily with their grandparents. So they're not learning that component too. Sorry, we're maybe veering off the article, but I think it's kind of important too.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big piece of it. In fact, we on Saturdays this quarter, I'm at KMHS with my VLBSN students, and we were just talking about that. They were like, I'm really surprised that OC doesn't require all nursing students to be CNAs first, because it would really get them that hands-on experience. And I said, yeah, I said, I think everyone does it different. I know my program didn't require it. They strongly recommended it, but I know there are other programs that do require it. So that might be something, to think about as well.
So, for a fact that I have from the beginning of time tried to get that to be a thing here at Olympic College, but actually the Board of Nursing has put the skids on that. They said for all nursing programs, what they really told us is we can't require it. Now, some still do in Washington State, and I'm not sure how they get away with it, but we've been told that it can't be a requirement, but you can use it like we do as a factor point. So that does kind of sweeten the pot as far as that goes.
So I need to introduce you, Beth. Beth,
Sorry.
Charlotte is from Whatcom. The rest of us are from OC, and Beth is the associate dean of our PM program and our nursing assistant program.
I apologize for being late. I was juggling cupcakes for Florence Nightingale's birthday celebration at lunch, and left my keys in my car, so I had to get some help.
All right.
The only other thing I wanted to note on this one too is, and I feel like I didn't see a date of when they did it, but it was like approved by the IRB in like 2021. And I just think of like the change in AI over even like the last year and a half, that you could probably even get some like higher fidelity things going, and maybe even a bit more of that organic piece.
I wanted to say one more thing. I was thinking as I was looking at that article, that we have our corpsmen and medics to PN students, that one of the components they are missing is the geriatric piece. And that's one of the things that we make up with them by having them go do their preceptorship in long-term care. But I am thinking that from the educational, perhaps in our first two courses, the transition courses, it's some sort of simulation that involves geriatric or case studies or things like that, that would involve the geriatric population, would be a nice integration. I used an AI kind of, when I did my graduate, they did an AI prompted assessment course. And so I forget her name, but everybody hated her. But we all did the same, everybody did the same thing. And it was okay. It was better than just a case study for sure, because we did have responses that were AI generated that were appropriate to the questions I asked, which you just learned how to ask better questions, which I guess intentionally, that is the purpose of that course, right? To get to the right information. So.
I know for myself when I was reading it, and I could have missed it, did it say at what point of their program these students were? Because so much of, for nursing, students eventually end up going to the hospital, and you always end up seeing geriatrics in there at some point. Our students end up getting exposed to it quite a bit because the majority of our hospital users end up being older adults. So I was just kind of wondering if this was earlier on where they didn't have any of that to take down those biases, or if it was trying to eliminate them before they saw these patients. But for me, our students in their first quarter and second go into ALF and ECF. And then eventually, I think in third quarter, they get a home care experience as well. So for me, I was like, I don't know how much value it would have like in our program to do AI just to kind of take down that bias. But I just wasn't sure what other people thought on that wavelength.
Yeah, these were senior level community health nursing students in a baccalaureate program. Yeah, I feel like our students, we get the introduction to the older adult in the first quarter, and they go into assisted living facilities for some of their older adult stuff. And then second quarter, they spend the whole quarter in a long-term care facility. But when I taught that older adult class, they were, I had an assignment that would bring out your kind of your biases and your experience with older adults and what do you want to be when you're an older adult. And then they would share them. And it was quite clear actually that the people who had experience with older adults, they took care of grandma or they grew up with their grandparents, their attitude was very different than people who had not ever had exposure.
Yeah, the other thing too is when you're looking at traditional BSN programs, they're set up so differently than the ADN programs, where we kind of jump right into it and where they have a lot more theoretical stuff first before they get a lot of hands-on experience, I think. So that also probably makes a difference. I was thrilled to see that they used reflection, because we talk a lot about reflection in our program, and the importance of reflecting on how you felt and what you experienced and how you could do it better and all that. So I was glad they used that. I was also interested to see that there actually is a geriatric attitudes survey that UCLA created, which I've never heard of before. And I thought, that's interesting. Maybe we should give them that the first day of Nurse 160 before they go to long-term care, to see kind of self-assess on how they feel.
Yeah, I meant to look that scale up. I had not heard of it either.
There's a couple of different ones. There's one that I feel like is really big and I can't remember the name, but it's a little bit older, so some of the language is off. And when I've done it with students before, I was like, I don't think I'll use that again. Because I would, in the first quarter when we talk about, I have kind of that building. So it was nice to see another scale, because when I was like, I don't like this, I need to either change it or something. Share my screen again, sorry. Okay, you guys seen it?
Mhm.
So again, keeping with the AI, this one was looking at some of that pre-simulation things and making generative AI images for pre-simulation to kind of help tell the story. And so it was really more of like a pilot study, just looking at like, could this be something useful in a more just qualitative and getting some of that response back from students. The intro goes really in depth of like the benefit of having some of those connections with images, and then really specifically in the nursing simulation piece, like how could you supplement that? Because sometimes it is like you may just be looking at a chart or you're reading a backstory, and then like what kind of connection are you making to the experience? And I mean, I think again, something to be said for that with most folks, we do kind of associate imagery and different things with more connection. And I will just name a limitation again, as it being a pilot study. I think there were only 15 folks who actually participated with the images, and only 13 responded to their survey. But there really was just kind of like yes, no questions, seeing if the images helped build upon that backstory that they were getting. And so they noted only 13 of the students had responded, but they were specifically looking at if it gave enough like preparatory knowledge, context, anticipation of care, and increased emotional connection. Because one of the things they really talked about was kind of having that anxiety, a little bit of the unknown. And so really looking at like, did this help prepare more? And then they noted 84.6 answered yes, that when they rewatched the backstory at least once outside of class. So they were really utilizing it a little bit more. Again, it kind of just went through like slides with the images as it was being narrated. So I think different from that first one where you actually were interacting with something in a little bit more of like a dialogue type of way to assess, but still being able to make the connections. And then, sorry, I want to make sure. Um, they did know, I think in general, like what the evidence has shown is when you do have like those images, additional like visual resources with either your pre-simulation or just any activity that you're doing, that it's going to help uh, students make those connections, be a little bit more engaged and involved in it. The overall, again, looking at can generative AI be useful for that? Um, I think what it was a little bit light on was kind of the focus, because I think even using AI now, the images can look quite different between each iteration, and some of the things that you're getting back. So I would just be a little bit more curious as to like what specifically they were prompting as they developed their imagery. They again talked about kind of those cases and that the images were with it, but I think it's missing a little bit on that end. And then, again, the overall takeaway being that it could be a useful tool, especially because again, we don't always have like the right image, or there's not a video or a case or something that we can show when we're making those simulations. And then also, I think it seems like in our program, Susie does a lot of work of like making these really like unique scenarios and simulations. And so you're not always going to have the right thing to connect to that, if that makes sense. And then you cannot have actors all the time and all these different things to really like add to that pre-simulation knowledge. And so I think this could be a useful way to kind of build upon.
Thanks, Brad. I love this article. It has gotten my head spinning. Like so much, I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can you tell us which way is it spinning now? And while she's thinking, I do want to put another plug for the importance of having a simulation manager. And I mean, she's been doing these stories, I don't know, for a long time now. Did you read this article? And before you began giving us true stories of those geriatric patients?
Well, where my thinking started was we started using in our mental health simulations, we started using more NLN based patient scenarios, right? Like there's a veteran scenario and transgender scenario, and they all come with monologues. And we were playing the monologues at the beginning of the sim day as part of their pre-briefing sort of. And then we were thinking, and Christy is the course lead in mental health. And I'm curious your thoughts on this, Charlotte, because then we were thinking, oh, we actually had to shorten our day. So we put those monologues in Canvas and said, hey, read these before you come. And we were thinking, well, that's a good idea for a couple reasons. It'll save us a little time, but it'll also allow them time to be better emotionally prepared for difficult topics. But then one of the adjunct instructors is like, I don't think they listen to the monologues. So I noticed in this one, the first time they listened, or they listened to them, it was in class, so it was required. But then after that, they had the opportunity to listen again for prep, right? Which is not something we have. But I was also, and now I'm also kind of torn, is like, is it better to have it just be an MP3 file where they can listen to it in the car on the way to school? Or is it that beneficial to have the visual as well? And then I'm reluctant to have the visual unless I could embed what our simulator is going to look like into that AI generated image. Does that make sense? Because I don't want them to go and look at this person and then they walk in the sim room and it's a totally different person. But can you do that? Can you say, I want you to make this image into this? Will AI do that?
Yeah, did you not see my superhero it made of me? And I was able to give it specific things like, that I wanted to have a coffee cup with a Sigma logo in my hand. I wanted to be wearing a red shirt. I uploaded a picture of a person. You could upload a picture of your mannequin of Apollo and have it create the AI image based off that image that you upload. Absolutely.
Is it worth that much work?
It's not that much work. It's really uploading a picture, a media file, and then giving it 2 or 3 sentences of parameters, and it will create that. It's super easy. Yeah.
And you can do some pretty creative stuff, Susie. Like you can, always talking about my kids, right? So the kids uploaded a picture of themselves, and then they're like, make an AI of us. And then they uploaded pictures from Harry Potter wearing these clothes. And they uploaded a picture of the backyard in the backyard. And then AI generated a picture of them in Harry Potter clothes in the backyard. There it is. And then that's their new whatever picture. So you can do that. Like, here's the picture of the sim room. Here's what you, descriptor of what you want them to do. Make them sandy gray hair, you know, whatever, 350 pounds, and it'll do the thing.
What do you think, Chris?
Oh, listen, I would love it. I think anything we can do that can increase their emotional connection to the scenario and to the client, I think is fabulous. I'm just upset that, you know, I'm just finishing a 7-year PhD program, and for the first 5.5, we didn't have AI. So I was really busting my butt on a lot of things that I don't need to bust my butt now about because I have help, which is actually really nice. Yeah, absolutely. I think anything we can do to increase the experience is definitely worth it. And I don't think it would be that much work. I really don't.
I think a lot of the time that you put into writing the scripts and things like that, that you could just verbalize into an AI, like you could just have your voice tell AI what to do instead of having to type all of that and reduce a lot of time anyway for you. I think that you could really use it beneficially to reduce the work that we do. Work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah, the last time I got a script was I had a patient that was on the NLN source, and they were like, this patient. I'm like, but I want to know what that patient's going to say, right? And so I went into Copilot and said, I need a monologue from this patient who's feeling this, who's here, who's doing all this. It was the most beautiful thing. It was just lovely. And I had to, I hardly ever had to edit it at all. Yeah, and so I'm thinking that then if I tell them it's a video, then they'll look at it and go, oh, I want it, like it's just more input to make those connections. I was curious when they talked about, they were looking at their methods, and at the completion of the simulation, it says students were provided with a 15-minute reflection break. So I was curious what, Charlotte, have you done that? You just like say, just sit here and think about it?
No, but when we do have simulations that have a bit more of emotional component or a bit longer or anything like that, we do tend to just give them like a scheduled break of about 10 minutes, not telling them that that's the purpose of it, but giving them the opportunity to do that if they need to step out. But most of the time, I think they're just using it to decompress a little bit in other ways and go to the bathroom. So I haven't done it specifically in that way. I have a lot of ideas about things to do for debrief, but we're always so limited by time and staffing right now. So hopefully we can fix that a bit in the future.
Yeah, we can't talk. We can't use the S word right now. It's pretty raw.
I liked that it also noted for like future applications, having students like co-create images, which again, I think gets me thinking on, I don't know if their intent there, but like if we gave them a list of like assessment data, like what would it be if they were to like make this patient, or like where a student's brain might go. And even going back to like that first one where you're doing kind of some of these bias checks, it could be a potential option to explore. I see that more like in a classroom versus like a simulation setting, but still just kind of made me think of a different way that I would maybe want to use AI.
I love the idea. I think it could be maybe their ticket to entry that way. So it still can be in simulation. That's a pretty cool idea, Bradley.
Well, and that would be consistent with the idea of we need to help students learn how to use AI constructively, in a meaningful way, as opposed to like crocheted hats on cats, which is very cool, by the way.
I do wish we
think-
had better, and I don't know how this would even work, but better AI detectors. Because, for example, I have 5 chapters in my dissertation. And I've always used Grammarly for years, because back then Grammarly didn't have AI, but it would just tell you little things like, oh, you've used this word 7 times, maybe try a different word, just to kind of clean it up. So I ran it through the Grammarly now has an AI detector. And I said, I'm going to run my chapters through just for SHITS and giggles. And I think it was chapter 4, came back that it appeared that 50% of it was generated by AI. And this paper has never been touched by AI. And I'm like, so either I write like AI or this detector's not great because it's not correct. So I don't know what the answer is to that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Chris, because I have a concern about schools rigorously bringing them in, the AI checkers, before they've been validated. I have a friend doing her PhD in Ohio, and she just turned in a draft just like you. And that happened, but they're basically running it through a checker. And she was told by, I'm sure it's their version of Heather, so by their School of Health Sciences librarian, that the higher level, that the algorithm has basically learned that if you use unusual words, that students don't use unusual words. Well, if you're doing a PhD or a dissertation or a thesis, you're going to be using unusual words. And so the higher levels of learning and scholarly work is going to flag higher. And she's really kind of in a pickle where she's having to go through and submit all of these drafts and these like outlines and everything because it's flagging high. And so I hope that like as a college, we start this discussion that it needs to be robust and vetted before we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater.
So
Yeah.
that happened in 8th grade for my child this year. We actually
Yes.
had a plagiarism accusation, and they ended up not even grading his assignment and just throwing it out because I took it and ran it through Turnitin, Grammarly, and 4 other AI detectors. And I did through plagiarism detector and AI detector. So they're separate also. So you need to think about those. You can't get both out of the same tool necessarily. And depending on which checker I used, it said 0% human or 100% human. And I know that the child wrote it 10 feet from me and used a thesaurus and a dictionary to find fancier words because he was writing it in the language of the 1700s. And then to be accused, I'm like, but you are thwarting his creativity.
Thwarting.
You would appreciate that, because he was so excited about the work he produced, and now you've accused him of it not being original work. And why would he work that hard if he's going to be told that it was clearly AI written? Because we don't trust that it wasn't, even though you wrote it within 10 feet of your mother, who went through 4 hours of doing AI and plagiarism checkers to just show you that you were wrong. And I did find articles that did say that they're largely unreliable and that you can't rely on that for whether to accept a student's work or not.
Yeah. It's almost like you have to dumb down your writing so it doesn't, trigger an AI warning.
Um, I know for the article, I always think about things on the back end. So, and they did mention it in the article, you know, that you and well, one thing I don't know if you mentioned, but the cost of whatever program you're going to be using for it, because most of them aren't completely free or they're very cumbersome to use if you're using a free version. So, you know, having that subscription, but you know, the staff training and the time it takes to become proficient with it. And then the other thing I always think about is for our simulations anyway, you know, we'll have our slide deck, we have our setup documents, our scripts. And if we make one change, we need to make sure it's changed in every spot. So this is another spot that we need to make sure we make those changes in. And depending on how you would do it, it could be more or less cumbersome. So that was because Gail and I were together this weekend and talked about it. And that was one of our big things is we do our best to update every spot every time, but the students inevitably find the one where we didn't. And this would just be another thing where students, you know, might break or it would require more of that suspending of disbelief from them to try to forget about the inconsistencies or try to sort through them. So we were just thinking about the man hours to do all of that, and then how it could impact student experience if it's not congruent with everything else, which can be very challenging with them.
I wonder if
Yeah.
AI could check it for you, Charlotte. See, like, compare these.
Compare all the documents.
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's one of my ongoing struggles with administration is how much time it takes, administration and faculty. It's like, how much time does it take to make one change? Like, oh, you don't like D5.25 normal saline that we've been using for 5 years? Fine, we can change that to D5.5 in 25 different places. And then you miss one, and
Yep. And for us, it's always the label on the actual bag. So then the students think we've set them up.
Yep. And I'm like, yeah, that happened to me this week. I was like, the LRN was like, didn't we talk about changing this to D5.5? And I'm like, it is D5.5. Look right there. And she goes, but it's not right here and right here. And I'm like, we had this conversation in the fall. I know I did the changes, but only some of them.
I do know that for our program, we tend to, and we have like a student packet that they're supposed to review ahead of time. And I know some do and some don't. And some are very blatant about not doing it, where I say, you know, when you did your prep, and they're like, who preps for sim? And I was just like, oh my gosh, they're about to graduate. I'm so worried. But we have images that at least we'll post up, and they don't always match up with the mannequin, which is something I always struggle with, especially when you're looking at trying to integrate diversity. And you know, your simulator doesn't look at all like that. But I do know that I talked to the students at one point, because I talked to the faculty about, does this actually help? So then I brought it to the students, and they did really like having those images, even if it wasn't reflected on the mannequins, because then when they were doing their prep work, they just had a better idea about it. So this did resonate with me in that way, thinking it is something that I think the students would truly appreciate. It's just one of those, you know, do the benefits outweigh the cost of doing it? And, you know, and is it just feasible to even do and maintain? But I know students would like it. It's just all the other components of implementing it as well.
And that's prior to coming to the sim lab.
Yes, yeah, they have about a week ahead of time, we upload the student packet along with the prep. Well, it has all the prep pieces and everything in it for them to review, that has a brief 1-paragraph snippet maybe about the patient, so they know what disease process is, and they know about the skills that they're going to be expected to perform, and that, so it's available well in advance to them.
Yeah, we do something very similar, and then we add like the medication list, and they have to fill the medication list out, but then they have to submit that, because if they haven't submitted it, then they're not prepared for simulation. They're not prepared to provide care, and they may have to sit out the first half of it to go and do that work.
Yeah, we actually just talked about that this weekend, because they do get a copy of our EHR that has the medication list, and we don't require them to prove that they've looked up the medications. And the way that we kind of catch that is by the patient asking questions. Why am I taking this? Is there anything I need to look at? And then, you know, we'll debrief. And I talked about requiring that paperwork, but then it puts an onus on whoever's facilitating to make sure it's done. And so, yeah, we're kind of here and there about that part of it.
I just had a thought. We have computer science program at OC, do we?
Yeah.
Perhaps a student in their last quarter or whatever the projects they're doing can actually come and look at our processes in simulation and give us some ideas, recommendations, whatever. Because I can see, especially because you're saying an S word is a bad word now. And we have all these, we have pixes, we have, oh, did you switch the clock to the right time? Then we have the wow, then we have Canvas information. That is so many pieces to look and make sure that they will correlate if there are any changes that are being made. It's 21st century. I bet there is a way, especially if we delegate it to someone else to do it for free, to at least look at our processes and give us recommendations. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking about how much work it would take to get that person to understand what we do and why we're doing it.
Well, that's this person's job. They will have to participate, look, and dive into it, especially like if it's their capstone process of some sort. I just think it's maybe worth at least asking the computer science deans or whoever they are and see if it's feasible. But they may have some really cool ideas, and like I said, it can be free.
Always back to the resources. Nothing's free. Unless there's a student somewhere, but I know our computer science faculty are all overloaded, just like our nursing faculty are.
Well, not the faculty, Beth,
Yeah, but if there's, like you said, a student, we have a bachelor's program. I don't know if they have capstone projects and things now, but there is a bachelor's program. So perhaps, like you said, that might be a thing there.
yeah, and people usually always look for projects and organizations are submitting those projects and
And I think doesn't Western State have a computer science master's, like somehow?
I don't know, but Susie,
Uh,
do you want me to bring it to people? I can volunteer myself.
No, I'm just sitting here thinking who would be to talk to. But I'll see Rich Becker in a meeting soon. We could talk to him. What are you thinking about the Robinson grant, Brad?
Oh, it's for if you have like a project going and they said there's up to 45,000 to distribute for 25, 26.
Yeah.
Could help with some of that funding.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm moving into a mode of wanting to automate a lot more of these bits. And so Whatcom just got their program endorsed in January, right? And so we have 18 months before our endorsement needs to be resubmitted. And so I'm just trying to like open to the universe of how to automate that process and keep things in place. Like, like for accreditation, we have is it a SPE? Is that what we call it? Right? How to have something that's just ongoing to make sure things are. I would like to just kind of push a button and have it spit out the endorsement application again.
Well, you could copy and paste your 2-page narrative into Chat GPT and say rephrase. And then proofread it really well compared to the criteria. But that's my biggest thing with faculty right now is just put it in there and say rephrase and you get another test question.
Yeah. And add these recommendations.
There you go. Yep, just paste in the feedback from them and say to adjust the statement, keep it within 2 pages. You can do it. It might give you a really good launching point anyway. That's mostly all what I use, AI for.
Can you guys see the QR code?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and then, Yelena, do you want me to put the form link in the chat?
No, but can you email it to me like you always do? Thank
You're
you.
so needy. Yes, I can do that.
You're the best.
Does anybody want to present next time? When is it, in June? I'm in a meeting. I can't figure out how to stop sharing. There,
It's not me knocking on your door for once.
it's not you. It's not Jen, it's not bad.
Hey, Chris, I have a question. You've been advertising Delta Airlines, and would David have any type of discounts for us then?
Yeah, I'll ask him and see what he says. I don't,
Right. If we have to stare at that Delta and Delta East.
well, I actually wore my Olympic college hat too.
Uh-huh.
So yeah,
He doesn't have any discounts for Olympic either.
that's right.
There's no discounts at community colleges.
Oh.
I'm completing this form now, even though I missed the first 10 minutes and I promised to go back and listen to it.
It's fine. Actually, we started 9 minutes late, so you did not miss that
Oh,
much.
I missed a minute then or so. Thank you.
Yeah. And we always count this as a 45-minute hour because you have spent 15 minutes reading the articles.
Got it.
We started late because we were waiting for you, Beth.
Thank you. I appreciate that always.
They're still knocking at my door.
All right.
All right. Well, we'll see you in June and
Thank
figure
you.
out.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Oh, Susie, before I hop off, Gail and I were talking about maybe trying to find a time to come over to Olympic and just kind of see the facilities and stuff there. I wasn't sure if that sounded like something you'd be interested in.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Whenever you think you can come.
Yeah, I have no idea, but we'll try to figure out. We have a new sim tech that's starting this Friday too, so it might be good for them to kind of. But I have no idea if it would be for the end of the quarter or kind of in the fall. But yeah, I'll talk to Gail a bit more about it and see what we can maybe come up with. And if you're magically ever this way, we're happy to show you ours as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because for the size of our program, it's actually surprisingly well set up.
Yeah, no, I love to see other places too. I just don't
Yeah.
like to travel. But I was gonna say something else. Oh, no, they're because of all this budget stuff, right? Finally, they're like, well, why aren't you doing all the simulations? Why are we hiring these other people to help with it? And I'm like, because the WAC says if you're facilitating, you can't be running the simulator.
Yeah, if you're doing the 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm. And
We
they're like,
haven't implemented 1 to 2 yet.
we started, all of them are 1 to 2 this quarter. And we thought it would decrease our amount of time in sim, amount of days in sim. And
We're still recording. I just realized. It might be trimmable.